Hey everybody, this is Dan, and this is week 4, module 4 of History 3380. And the title of this module is Jefferson, Hamilton, and Intellectual Property. If you remember last week, we talked about the first British colonist in North America. So we talked about the Jamestown colony in 1609, and we talked about Massachusetts Bay in 1620s, 1630s, and the commonality between those two groups of colonists was that they brought capitalism and private enterprise, for-profit enterprise with them. So that was sort of the theme that capitalism arrived on the first ships. In the South, it was this idea that tobacco was grown early on as a for-profit crop, and in the North, the small businesses of the Massachusetts Bay colony that were privately held for-profit businesses. And the point was that we were trying to get to now. We were trying to trace backwards from today back to the nation's roots and these capitalist roots that were there early on. So from the early 1600s, we're going to move ahead almost 200 years, not quite, to 1790s and the signing of the Constitution and the beginnings of the United States, the formal beginnings of the United States. And when we're thinking about business and sort of the important events in capitalism here in North America, certainly the founding fathers were very pro-capitalist people, and it's even codified or written into our Constitution in several different ways. And my interpretation of that comes through this idea of intellectual property. So if we look at the module objectives for this week, 3 of them have to do with intellectual property, and intellectual property is another way to say patent law, trademark law, copyrights, things that people own. And this week, what we're really concerned with is patent law, because anytime you talk about a history of business technology or innovation in America, patent law is really important, and we're gonna read about it with different people, time and time again. So we need to get to the roots of that. If you read the Constitution in your spare time and you go to Section 8, Article 1, it talks about the idea of progress and the idea of a strong patent system. Now, what a patent is it's a law or something that's granted to an inventor that gives that inventor the sole right to manufacture or license his invention. So if I invent something like a new cell phone and I put a lot of time and money into the research and development to do this, once I finish it, I don't want other people to sort of steal my idea and start making what I invented. So I can apply for a patent, and that gives me protection. Originally it was for a term of 17 years, now it's for a term of 20 years. It gives the inventor a monopoly to manufacture or license the manufacture of their product or their process, if you will. And that was something that the founding fathers really believed in, because they felt that if inventors were motivated to invent new technology, then that would help the economy grow, and that would help create this business climate, this climate of innovation. So it is written into the Constitution, and Alexander Hamilton was a big proponent of this. So, when you're asked on the quiz to define what a patent is, it's a law or a legal right to manufacture or license an invention and be the sole person doing it. So to have a monopoly on something that you invented, list the reason that the patent system was developed. That's pretty easy to sort of spur innovation or to motivate people to innovate to help the economy grow. And then explain how a patented technology differs from an open source technology. You may be familiar with like open source computer code. That's something that's not protected and that's not patented, and people can modify open source code as they see fit. It's really the opposite of something patented. And if you look at the founding fathers, as I mentioned, someone like Alexander Hamilton, he was really into the patent system because he thought it was good for the country, good for business, good for technological growth. On the other hand, someone like Ben Franklin, he was an anti-patent guy. He believed that if you invent a useful thing like the Franklin stove, that you should share that with everyone else for sort of the good of mankind. And so Franklin was an anti-patent person, and so you could consider Franklin sort of an open source guy, only way back in the late 1700s, long before computers were around. So that kind of gives you an idea of the intellectual property piece of this module. There's a article, it's kind of old, I think it's from the 80s, but there's an article you need to read this week, posted in the assignments, and it's about the patent system, and it's pretty interesting, so make sure you get through that. Now, the other thing you have to do this week is read a short article about Alexander Hamilton. And anytime you talk about the history of business or the history of the economy in the U.S., you have to talk about Hamilton, because he was a person who believed in a strong central government, in the sense that the federal government could help build infrastructure. So something like the National Road that was one of the first sort of highway projects, if you will, but it was a dirt road. It wasn't like what we know as a highway. Hamilton believed that the government should help fund things like that, because if you grow the infrastructure, you're going to grow business, and that's the way he looked at things. Now, he really was the opposite of Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson thought that the nation should remain a nation of farmers, and he really didn't want a big manufacturing presence in this country. So Jefferson said, let manufacturing stay in England, who was, England was going through the Industrial Revolution at that time in the late 1700s. So it's just two views. Hamilton was pro-business, pro-build the economy, pro-manufacturing, and Jefferson was really a small government, anti-federalist. Let's remain just a pleasant, pastoral, agricultural country. And so I want you to know that, because Hamilton is a big name when we're talking about capitalism and the modern economy, because a lot of his ideas moved forward today. So, something like the central bank, which Hamilton was into, ultimately turned into this idea of a Federal Reserve, with an interruption in the early 1800s when Andrew Jackson shut it down for about 80 years. But that's another story completely, and we'll get there. So that's one thing about Hamilton, this idea of a government that could help business grow. And then the other thing about Hamilton is this idea of the central banking system, that he believed we had to have sort of a stable banking system to help the economy, and that's really important. So when we say one of the objectives here is why might Alexander Hamilton be considered the architect of the modern economy? Plain and simple, because he believed in this idea of a strong central banking system. So that's the answer to that one. And then the other module objective, identify a philosophical difference between Hamilton and Jefferson. Hamilton was pro-business, wanted to see the U.S. become independent manufacturing country, and Jefferson thought that at best we remain a sort of a pastoral country of farmers. So that's the difference there. So this week is the same as last week. Go ahead, study the objectives, look at a few definitions, and do the readings, and then you'll have a micro quiz, a 25-point quiz, and then you'll have a discussion board post for 100 points that you'll have to complete. And then we'll be done with this module, and we'll move on to week 5. So thanks for everything. If you have any questions, reach out to me. My my cell phone is 419-345-7220. Feel free to text or call. My email, daniel.french@utoledo.edu, and that contact information, of course, is on the class website. I hope you have a great, safe week. Take care. Bye.